My boots crunched on the volcanic rock as I made my way toward the rim of Crater Lake. The radio clipped to my belt crackled with routine chatter from park stations. It had been 3 days since the call about Dad's heart attack, and I still couldn't grasp how rapidly life had shifted. One moment, he was checking trail conditions near the visitor center. The next, he was gone. Below me, the lake stretched out, impossibly blue and perfectly circular, the result of an ancient volcanic collapse that carved out this massive caldera. I'd seen this view countless times growing up, yet today it felt somehow hollow, empty. Dad had brought me to this very spot when I was 8, pointing across the water toward a dark speck near the center. "That's the old man of the lake," he said, handing me his binoculars. It had been drifting there for over 100 years. No one really knew how long. The old man was still out there now, a weathered tree stump about 30 feet long, floating vertically with just a few feet visible above the surface. Scientists speculated about why it didn't sink or decay like normal wood, something about the lake's cold temperature and mineral content. But Dad favored the older stories, the ones his grandfather William used to tell about mysterious beings living in the depths. I raised my binoculars to the distant log. From this height, it looked like a tiny piece of driftwood, but I knew its true size. Tourists loved taking photos of it, though most didn't realize what they were seeing unless a ranger pointed it out. Dad had made identifying the old man a highlight of every guided tour, turning it into a game for families with children. Yesterday's funeral had been crowded with people I barely knew. Fellow rangers from across the state, locals whose lives Dad had touched over the years. Everyone spoke of what a good man he'd been and how deeply the community would miss him. Their words meant a lot, but they didn't fill the emptiness he left behind. Robert Thompson had been more than just a park ranger. He was the guardian of this place's stories. Now, that responsibility was mine. I was the third generation of Thompsons charged with watching over these trails and shorelines. Great-grandfather William had started here in the 1940s when the park was wild and visitors few. Dad followed in the 70s, and I joined 5 years ago after finishing my degree in forestry. It was supposed to be a gradual handover, with Dad mentoring me for a decade before retiring. Instead, I was left alone with questions I never thought to ask. The radio squawked again, pulling me back from my thoughts. I unclipped it and pressed the talk button. "Station 1. This is Thompson at Rim Drive Overlook. Morning, Eli," came Sender Martinez's voice from the dispatch. "Sorry again about you, Dad. You sure you're ready to be back out there?" "Yeah, I need to stay busy. What's the patrol schedule?" "Light day, standard perimeter check and visitor center coverage. Weather looks good. Might see early season hikers on the rim trail." "Copy that. I'll start with the east shore and work my way around." I clipped the radio back on and took one last look across the lake. The old man had drifted closer to the western shore since yesterday, pushed by unseen currents. Dad had tracked its position daily, marking locations on the hand-drawn map he'd kept in his desk. He said the pattern mattered, but never explained why. There were other stories too. Tales Dad shared late at night when we camped beneath the stars in my teenage years. Stories of Emily Stevens, a woman who vanished in 1954 while camping near the shore. She'd seen something that terrified her so much she fled into the forest, never to be found. She saw the watcher, Dad whispered, his face serious in the firelight. That's what my grandfather called it. Something tied to the old man, something older than anyone can remember. I'd always assumed these were just campfire tales, folklore passed down to add enchantment to the place we guarded. Dad told them with a conviction that went beyond entertainment, as if he truly believed something ancient lurked beneath the surface. Walking back to my truck, I focused on practical details, patrol routes, maintenance tasks, the countless duties that kept the park running smoothly. Dad had left detailed notes covering everything, observations of wildlife and seasonal rhythms dating back decades. I would have to study them, learn this place's cadence as he had. The parking area near the rim was nearly empty except for my Ranger truck and a maintenance vehicle. Tourist season wouldn't begin in earnest for another month, giving me time to settle into the routine without crowds. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and reached for the radio on the dashboard. Station 1, Thompson here. Beginning East Shore Patrol. Copy, Eli. Check in every hour. I put the truck in gear and drove down the winding road to lake level, leaving the pavement for gravel, then the dirt track that followed the shoreline. This was my favorite part of the job. At water level, the lake's vast scale hit you. The rim towered nearly 2,000 feet above, stone walls holding the water like a massive bull. Dad had walked these paths for over 40 years, memorizing every rock formation and hidden inlet, knowing where to find the best fishing spots, eagle nests, and seasonal wildlife. That knowledge now felt impossibly vast, and I was alone to carry it forward. I parked at a small beach and walked to the edge. The water was so clear I could see the bottom plunging into darkness just a few feet away. Dad taught me that this clarity was deceptive. The lake reached nearly 2,000 feet deep, fed by underwater springs keeping temperatures just above freezing year-round. My radio crackled again, a routine weather update from the main station. I listened, watching waves lap against the rocky shore, thinking about all the stories this lake held. Emily Stevens was just one of many mysteries tied to Crater Lake. People had vanished in these forests for over a century, though most disappeared on trails far from the water. Emily's case was different. She disappeared right here at the shoreline. Her camping companions had heard her scream at midnight, saw her bolting toward the tree line, calling after her in vain. By morning, she was gone without a trace. I took a photo of the lake and sent it to my sister, Katie, in Portland. She had heard the same stories, but remained more skeptical of Dad's tales. Katie had come for the funeral, but left soon after, needing to return to her family and job. We debated whether I should take over Dad's role or let the Thompson legacy end here. "This place will eat you alive if you let it," she warned. Dad obsessed over those stories his whole life. Don't make the same mistake. But here I stood, feeling the weight of 3 generations watching over this water. I couldn't step away. Whatever secrets the lake held, whatever truth lay behind the watcher and the old man, I was part of it now. Dad had prepared me for this, even if I hadn't realized it yet. I climbed back into the truck and resumed my patrol, following the shoreline road to the next checkpoint. The radio was quiet, save for occasional updates. It was going to be a long day, a longer week, as I adjusted to working here without Dad's guidance. But the lake would still be here tomorrow, and for countless days after, just as it had been for thousands of years before the first Thompson ever set foot on its shore. Whatever lay ahead, I would face it as 3 generations of my family had, by keeping watch over the waters and the secrets beneath its perfect blue surface. My boots crunched against the volcanic rock as I approached the rim of Crater Lake. The radio clipped to my belt crackled with routine chatter from other park stations. It had been 3 days since the call came about Dad's heart attack, and I still struggled to grasp how quickly everything had changed. One moment, he was checking trail conditions near the visitor center. The next, he was gone. Below me stretched the lake, impossibly blue and perfectly circular, carved out by an ancient volcanic collapse that left this massive caldera behind. I had seen this view thousands of times growing up, but today it felt different, hollow somehow. Dad brought me to this very spot when I was 8, pointing across the water to a dark speck floating near the center. "That's the old man of the lake," he said, handing me his binoculars. It had been drifting there for over 100 years, though no one really knew for sure how long. Now, the old man remained out there, a weathered tree stump about 30 feet long, floating vertically with only a few feet visible above the surface. Scientists had their theories about why it didn't sink or decay like typical wood, something about the lake's cold temperature and mineral-rich waters. But Dad always preferred the older tales, the ones his grandfather William told about mysterious creatures lurking in the depths. I pulled out my own binoculars and scanned the distal log. From this height, it looked like a tiny piece of driftwood, but I knew how massive it truly was. Tourists loved photographing it, though most didn't know what they were looking at unless a ranger pointed it out. Dad had made identifying the old man part of every guided tour, turning it into a game for families with kids. Yesterday's funeral had been packed with people I barely knew, rangers from across the state, local business owners, families Dad had helped over the years. Everyone spoke of what a good man he had been, how deeply the community would miss him. I was grateful for their kindness, but their words didn't fill the void he left behind. Robert Thompson wasn't just a park ranger. He was the keeper of this place's stories. Now, that responsibility was mine, the third generation of Thompsons, tasked with tending these trails and shorelines. Great-grandfather William had started here in the 1940s, when the park was still wild and most of the tourists yet to come. Dad followed in the 1970s, and I joined the staff 5 years ago after finishing my degree in forestry. It was supposed to be a gradual passing of the torch, with Dad mentoring me for another decade before retirement. Instead, I was suddenly alone, facing questions I'd never thought to ask. The radio on my belt squawked, pulling me back to the present. I unclipped it and pressed the talk button. Station 1. This is Thompson at Rim Drive Overlook. Morning, Eli, came Sandra Martinez's voice, the dispatch coordinator. Sorry again about your dad. You sure you're ready to be back out there? Yeah, I replied. I need to stay busy. What's the patrol schedule looking like? Light day. Just the standard perimeter checks and visitor center coverage. Weather's holding, so we might see some early season hikers on the rim trail. Copy that. I'll start with the east shore and work my way around. I clipped the radio back and took one last look across the lake. The old man had drifted closer to the western shore since yesterday, nudged by currents I couldn't see from up here. Dad used to track its position daily, marking each location on a hand-drawn map he kept in his desk. He said the pattern mattered, though he never explained why. There were other stories, too, the ones Dad shared on quiet nights while camping under the stars during my teenage years. He'd tell me about Emily Stevens, a woman who vanished back in 1954. She and her friends had been camping near the shore when she claimed she saw something that terrified her. She ran into the forest, and those search teams found her campsite the next day. Emily herself was never seen again. She saw the watcher. Dad would whisper, his face lit by firelight, serious and grave. That's what my grandfather called it. Something connected to the old man, something that had lived in this lake longer than anyone could remember. I'd always thought these were just campfire stories, tales passed down to add mystery to the place we protected. But Dad told them with conviction, as if he truly believed something very old moved beneath the surface. Turning back to practical matters, I try to focus on the patrol routes, maintenance tasks, and the dozens of small jobs that kept the park running smoothly. Dad had left detailed notes about everything, including wildlife patterns and seasonal changes that spanned decades. I needed to study those records, learn the rhythms of this place as he had. The parking area near the rim was still empty, save for my ranger truck and a maintenance vehicle. Tourist season wouldn't begin for another month, giving me time to settle into the routine without crowds. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and reached for the radio mounted on the dashboard. Station 1, Thompson here. Beginning East Shore Patrol. Copy, Eli. Check in every hour. The winding road led me down to the lake level, where pavement gave way first to gravel, then to a dirt track hugging the shoreline. This was my favorite part of the job, being so close to the water, where the lake's vast scale truly sank in. The rim rose nearly 2,000 feet above, walls of stone holding the water like a massive bull. Dad had walked these paths for over 40 years, memorizing every rock, every hidden cove. He knew where to find the best fishing spots, eagle nests, and which areas attracted different wildlife throughout the seasons. That knowledge felt immense now. Knowing I had to carry it forward on my own, I parked near a small beach and walked to the water's edge. The lake was so clear I could see the bottom dropping abruptly into darkness just a few feet from shore. Dad had taught me that this clarity was deceptive. The lake reached depths nearly 2,000 feet in places, fed by underwater springs that kept its temperature just above freezing year-round. My radio crackled again, this time a weather update from the main station. I listened as small waves lapped the rocky shore, thinking about all the stories this place held. Emily Stevens was but one mystery tangled in Crater Lake's history. People had vanished here for over a century, though most disappeared far from the water on hiking trails. Emily's case stood apart. She vanished right at the shoreline where whatever had scared her began. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the lake, sending it to my sister Katie in Portland. She'd grown up hearing the same stories, but had always been more skeptical. Katie visited for the funeral, but had to return to her own life quickly. We had talked about whether I should really step into Dad's shoes, or if maybe the Thompson legacy at Crater Lake was coming to an end. This place will eat you alive if you let it, she warned. Dad spent his life obsessed with those old stories. Don't make the same mistake. But standing there now, feeling 3 generations watching over this water, I knew I couldn't walk away. Whatever secrets the lake held, whatever truth lay beneath the stories of the Watcher and the Old Man of the Lake, I was part of it now. Dad had been preparing me all along, even if I hadn't understood it then. I climbed back into the truck and continued my patrol, following the shoreline road toward the next checkpoint. The radio stayed quiet except for occasional updates from other parts of the park. It would be a long day and probably a longer week as I adjusted to working these places without Dad's guidance. But the lake would still be here tomorrow and the day after, as it had been for thousands of years, long before the first Thompson set foot on its shores. Whatever was coming, whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them just as my family had for generations. By keeping watch over this water and the secrets it held beneath its perfect blue surface. The Old Man of the Lake was a familiar sight, a weathered tree stump that had been drifting in Crater Lake for over a century. My father used to keep close tabs on it, tracking its movements daily and marking them on a hand-drawn map he safeguarded in his desk. He believed the pattern of its drift mattered, though he never fully explained why. Standing at the rim, I gazed out with binoculars, spotting the log closer to the western shore than the previous day, pushed by unseen currents. Scientists offer explanation for its buoyancy, citing the lake's cold temperatures and mineral-rich waters that preserve the wood in a way normal logs wouldn't survive. Yet my father cherished the older tales, the stories handed down from his grandfather, William, about the lake's deeper mysteries. Visitors often paused to photograph the old man, unaware of its significance unless a ranger pointed out. Dad had made spotting the log a feature of his tours, turning it into a playful challenge for families. But today, this familiar sentinel felt different. Not just a floating stump, but a key piece of a larger enigma that had shadowed our family for generations. As I embraced my new role, I understood the old man was more than a natural curiosity. It was a symbol, a guardian itself, wrapped tightly in the mysteries of Crater Lake. As I settled into my new role as the park's guardian, the unexpected began to unravel around me. While organizing the emergency medical supplies at the ranger station, the radio on my desk suddenly crackled to life, breaking the quiet morning routine I'd been striving to establish. The voice that answered sent a chill through me. It wasn't just familiar, it was Dad's voice. Yet there was something wrong. It sounded distant, hollow, as if coming from the depths of a well. The message was brief but cryptic. "Eli, don't let it leave the lake." My hands trembled as I dropped the bandages, fumbling with the radio in disbelief. I demanded to know who was transmitting, but was met only with static, an endless, empty noise that stretched on with no answer. Trying other channels yielded the same silence. And when I finally reached out to my supervisor, Sandra, her tone was calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Despite rationalizing the experience as a combination of grief and a possible equipment glitch, the unsettling nature of the voice lingered with me. Dad's warnings, once the comforting guides of my youth, now felt like dire cautions whispered through the ether, hinting at a danger I hadn't yet comprehended. The radio became a source of both hope and dread as I found myself constantly checking for another sign, caught between disbelief and an instinctive need to listen. The morning air was crisp as I arrived at the eastern shore, my boots hitting the familiar gravel path. The old man of the lake, the massive, weathered tree stump that had floated here for over a century, was nowhere to be seen. I lifted my binoculars, scanning every inlet and cove, tracing the liquid blue expanse for any sign of its slow drift, but the lake's surface remained empty, save for a few early-season kayakers near the boat launch. I drove to several vantage points, using both my binoculars and the station spotting scope, but the old man was gone. It had never vanished completely before, in all the decades of records. From my great-grandfather William's detail journals in the 1940s to the National Park Service's photographs spanning generations, it had always been present, a steady sentinel on the water. With a knot of unease tightening in my chest, I radioed Sandra at the main office. Station 1 to Sandra. The old man of the lake is missing from its usual spot. I've checked multiple locations, but can't find it anywhere. Her voice came back steady but softened by concern. Eli, it's probably just submerged briefly. Thermal currents can push it underwater this time of year. It should resurface soon. I wanted to believe her reassurances, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was unsettled. The disappearance wasn't just a simple drift beneath the waves. It was the breaking of a pattern that had lasted for over 70 years. A pattern that, if broken, threatened to unravel the delicate balance of this place. As I stood by the shore, staring into the impossibly blue depths where the old man had always floated, I realized that whatever had taken it from the surface had also set something loose, something tied to the mysteries my father had warned me about all my life. The reports began arriving quietly at first, curious accounts from visitors who had glimpsed something unusual along the shorelines of Crater Lake. It wasn't long before these sightings coalesced into a troubling pattern. Multiple witnesses described encountering an elderly man dressed in an old-fashioned ranger uniform, standing motionless by the water's edge. This figure, unfamiliar yet eerily familiar in his attire, seemed to blend seamlessly with the towering pines and rugged volcanic rocks. Janet Morrison, a visitor from Portland, recounted her experience with a mix of unease and disbelief. She and her family had been hiking near the East Shore Trail, just past the boat launch, when Janet spotted the man standing quietly by the water. Concerned he might be lost or confused, Janet approached him, only to find he neither turned nor spoke. And then, in a blink, he vanished, leaving no trace, no path away from the shore, as if he had dissolved into the mist. The following day, a group of college hikers brought a similarly unsettling report. Their leader, Marcus, told me how, during breakfast near the shore, they had seen the same solitary figure. His girlfriend Sarah had even captured photos of the campsite, but to their astonishment, the enigmatic ranger did not appear in any pictures, despite being visible to all. Each detailed the uniform, a heavy, dark green wool fabric from decades past, adorned with badges no longer in use. The uniform's authenticity pointed to something beyond a mere costumed tourist. These encounters weren't isolated. Word swiftly spread through social media. #Crater Lake Ghost Ranger began trending among local hiking groups and tourists. Fear and fascination mingled as more families came forward, hesitant to venture near the eastern shore at dusk. All the sightings nestled along the same half-mile stretch of water where Emily Stevens had vanished so many years ago, adding a chilling resonance to these ghostly encounters. As I marked each report on my map, The unmistakable pattern nagged at me. The ghostly ranger seemed tied to the shoreline's mysteries, connected not only to the eerie disappearance of the old man of the lake, but also to legends passed down through my family. These weren't mere rumors or folklore anymore. They were living, breathing phenomena that demanded more than just curiosity. They demanded answers. Eli's investigation grew more intense as he pieced together the eerie puzzle woven in a Crater Lake's history. The recent sightings of the ghostly ranger led him to the same stretch of eastern shoreline where Emily Stevens had vanished decades ago. This wasn't mere coincidence. There was a clear pattern binding these events to the old man's mysterious disappearance. Diving into his father's journals and records, Eli discovered a trove of historical logs documenting strange occurrences that correlated with times the old man of a lake had submerged or shifted unexpectedly. These accounts detailed sightings of shadowy figures in outdated ranger uniforms, vanishing campers, and unsettling noises along the shore. Each incident deepened the darkness, shrouding the lake's secrets. More startling was the connection between these apparition reports and the submersion episodes of the old man, suggesting that whenever the floating logs sank beneath the surface, the Watcher, the enigmatic entity his grandfather had named, was free to roam the shoreline. Eli found himself walking through decades of his family's meticulous work, realizing that the legends were tangled with real danger. With each page, Eli's resolve hardened. The benign image of the old man of a lake was fracturing into something far more sinister. The ghostly ranger reports weren't isolated incidents, but manifestations tied directly to the lake's ancient guardian and its unsettling companion. The Watcher was no mere myth. It was a force connected to the lake's depths. Rising when the old man's protection faltered, Eli felt the weight of generations bearing down on him, understanding that his pursuit of the truth was more urgent and perilous than ever before. The confrontation unfolded under the heavy cloak of night as I prepared to face the Watcher armed only with the knowledge passed down through generations. The old man of the lake lay submerged beneath the still surface, its massive, waterlogged form hidden in the darkness below. I donned my wet suit, the cold bite creeping against my skin, steeling myself for the dive that could determine our fate. As I descended into the frigid depths, the lake's oppressive silence wrapped around me, broken only by the faint creak of the ancient stump. Suddenly, a shift in the water stirred, movement that belonged not to wood or water, but to something more sinister. Emerging from a murk was a twisted, haunting form wearing the face I knew best, my father's. His eyes, hollow and filled with the greenish water of the lake, bore into me with an unnatural intensity. Moss clung to his skin like a shroud, and his mouth hung open in a wordless scream. The apparition lunged toward me with impossible speed, tendrils of bark peeling from his fingers in a grotesque mimicry of human grasp. My heart pounded as I scrambled backward, the rocky bottom scraping my palms. But the spectral figure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving only the cold lake and the echo of my father's warning flooding through my radio. "Run, Eli. Don't let touch you." Yet, retreat was not an option. With trembling hands, I secured the flotation devices to the old man's submerged form, forcing it upwards through the dark water. As the log broke the surface with a heavy groan, the Watcher exploded from beneath, no longer masked by the familiar face, but a terrifying amalgam of all the rangers who had guarded this place before me. Its body fluctuated through time, patches of uniform spanning decades, and faces from the past merging into a single, terrible entity. The Watcher's scream pierced the night, water cascading from its gaping mouth, and its eyes, dark pools of accumulated darkness, searched desperately for release. But as the old man rose fully to the surface, a whirling force pulled the Watcher back toward the depths. Its form decayed rapidly, skin flaking like moss falling apart in the wind, claws grasping wildly at the water surface. Bound once more by the ancient prison tethered to the floating log, the creature was dragged down into the cold abyss. I sat in the boat, breaths heaving, watching as the lake regained its tranquil mask. The old man of the lake floated once again, a silent sentinel guarding the secrets beneath, and I understood, with a renewed sense of duty, that this legacy was now mine to uphold. Beneath the dark waters of Crater Lake, Eli prepared for the moment that would decide the fate of the Watcher. With his diving suit icy against his skin and the weight of his family's legacy pressing on him, he descended into the depths. Following the rope tethered to his boat, the temperature dropped sharply as he went deeper, the water turning eerily green, reminiscent of the moss that had adorned the grotesque figure of his father by the shore. There, suspended like a cathedral pillar, hung the old man of the lake, a massive, time-worn Douglas fir, coated in algae and aquatic moss, resting about 30 feet below the surface. Steeling his nerves, Eli fastened multiple flotation devices to the log, each inflating slowly, attempting to lift the heavy, waterlogged wood back to the surface. Suddenly, the water around him shifted, chilling currents tugging at his gear as something immense rose up from the darkness. An entity wearing the visage of a park ranger, its form shifting and unnatural. Recognizing the imminent danger, Eli kicked upwards, breaking through the water just as the watchdog creature surged behind him, accompanied by the groan of ancient wood. Back on the boat, he washed as the log rose, churning the water violently. The Watcher erupted from the depths, shedding the deceptive semblance of his father and morphing into a horrific amalgam of past rangers, faces merging and shifting upon a patchwork uniform spanning decades. As the entity screamed an indescribable sound from below the surface, the old man settled back into its familiar vertical float. In that instant, the creature's form deteriorated, the moss flaking away as the lake reasserted its binding power, pulling the Watcher into a spiraling whirlpool. Frantic, it reached out but was ultimately dragged back beneath the surface, vanishing with a final silent scream. The water calmed once more, the lake's glassy face unbroken save for the gentle drift of the log. Eli sat in the quiet, the weight of what had transpired settling in. The prison was restored, and the evil that lurked beneath the lake was contained for another generation. As dawn broke, the old man of the lake resumed its centuries-long sentinel, silently keeping watch over Crater Lake's deepest secrets. The weight of my family's legacy settled heavily on my shoulders as I sat at my father's desk, surrounded by decades of notes and memories meticulously recorded by 3 generations of Thompsons. Each document held a story, a warning, a piece of the puzzle about the old man of the lake and the entity tied to it. The Watcher. I understood now that my role was far more than the routine maintenance of trails and visitor assistance. It was a sacred duty to safeguard the secrets of Crater Lake, a responsibility passed down through time like a solemn oath. From my great-grandfather William, who first dedicated his life to this place in the 1940s, to my father Robert, and now to me, the guardianship was both a privilege and a burden. The knowledge I carried was not just about geography or ecology. It encompassed the supernatural ties binding the lake's enigmas. Each generation had faced the unseen threats lurking beneath the calm blue surface, ensuring that they remained contained and that the stories, some truths, some legends, were preserved carefully, if silently. As I prepared myself to continue this lineage, I felt a profound connection to those who had come before me. Their vigilance, their sacrifices, and their quiet strength formed an unbroken chain protecting this sacred place. I realized that the legacy was less about what was spoken and more about what was understood, about watching, waiting, and guarding the balance between the peaceful beauty of Crater Lake and the dark mysteries that dwell beneath. With resolve, I embraced my place among the Thompsons. I was the keeper of stories, the sentinel of secrets, and the guardian of the lake, a legacy I vowed to honor, to protect, and to pass on for as long as the waters glistened beneath the endless sky. Eli sat alone in the quiet of the ranger station, the glow of his computer screen casting faint light over the scattered notes and journals accumulated across the desk. 3 weeks had passed since that fateful night when he had plunged in the icy depths of Crater Lake, fought the sinister entity, and restored the old man of the lake to its rightful place. Though much time had passed, the weight of those events lingered heavily on his mind. He wrestled with how best to document the truth, what had truly happened beneath the water, and the chilling messages borne on the radio waves in his father's voice. The official report he eventually wrote was clinical and measured, focusing on the scientific data, the temporary submersion of the old man, the GPS coordinates, temperature readings in thermal patterns. It did not hint at the darker realities, the ghostly appearances, the vanished tourists, or the ancient watcher bound beneath the lake's surface. Eli attributed the unsettling eyewitness reports to optical illusions stirred by unusual lighting and the raw grief clouding his judgment in those early days after his father's passing. It was a rational explanation designed to satisfy his superiors and avert unwelcome scrutiny, even as his heart knew there was more to the story. Behind the scenes, Eli continued the family tradition, meticulously transcribing his experiences into the leather-bound journals inherited from his great-grandfather and father. Within those pages, he painstakingly recorded the eerie radio transmissions, every sighting call from visitors, and the detailed night he confronted the malevolent watcher itself. Most importantly, he captured the ancient knowledge surrounding the old man of the lake, the keystone that bound the watcher in watery captivity, and a fragile balance that guarded the park from darkness. Life at Crater Lake began to return to its familiar rhythms. Visitors resumed their hikes. Photographers flocked to the shores to capture images of the floating log, and tales of the ghostly ranger faded into whispers and social media shadows. Yet Eli's vigilance never slackened. Each morning and evening, he observed the old man's position, noting any unusual drifts in his weathered notebook clipped to his radio. The old man remained steadfast, its presence a silent sentinel ensuring the lake's peace. Eli delved deeper into the history of a land and its peoples, seeking wisdom from clam-off tribal elders, whose oral tradition spoke of a being long bound beneath the lake's depths, an entity that could assume the visage of the departed and roam the land under certain conditions. These tales underscored the gravity of the responsibility he now bore. He understood why his father had shielded him from the full truth until the time was right. This guardianship was not merely a job to be passed down casually. It was a burden to be embraced fully, a vigilance woven into the fabric of their lives. On thoughtful afternoons at his favorite overlook, Eli would watch families marvel at the old man of the lake, fascinated children peering through binoculars, parents explaining its scientific mysteries, never realizing the ancient watch kept beneath the waves. The lake held its secrets tight, and Eli had come to accept that some mysteries were meant to remain in the shadows, entrusted only to those who understood their profound significance. The Thompson legacy endured, their silent oath renewed. The old man drifted peacefully on the surface, a serene guardian over Crater Lake's hidden depths. Eli felt, at last, a quiet peace settle over him. This was his calling, to stand watch, to protect, and to keep the balance between the natural world and the unseen forces that lingered just beneath its tranquil surface. The secrets would continue, hidden, guarded, and alive. Eli Thompson has now fully embraced his role as the guardian of Crater Lake's deepest secrets, understanding the delicate balance required to protect both the lake and its ancient legends. The lake's surface once again rests in serene calm, concealing the mysteries beneath as it has for countless years. As Eli watches over the old man of the lake, he acknowledges that some truths are meant to remain hidden, and some duties must be quietly carried on by those who grasp their profound significance. The legacy of the Thompson family endures, steadfast in preserving the fragile peace between the lake's beauty and the dark forces it contains. If you found this tale fascinating and intriguing, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories.